The Wire and the Willow, Part 1. The Singing Woman, 6,000 Words. I am 92 years old now, sitting in a Louisiana nursing home where the air smells of antiseptic and the ghosts of people who forgot their names. Through the window, I can see a willow tree bending in the autumn wind, its branches touching the ground like fingers reaching for something lost. That tree reminds me of another willow one that grew beside a prisoner of war camp in New Mexico in 1944. And that tree reminds me of a woman who sang in German while washing clothes in a metal basin, her voice carrying across barbed wire like a prayer no one was meant to hear. This is the story I have never told. Not to my wife who passed 20 years ago, not to my children who think they know everything about their father, not to the priests who asked me to confess sins I could not name because I never believed they were sins at all. My name is James Patrick Donnelly. In 1944, I was 27 years old, a sergeant in the United States Army, assigned to guard German prisoners at Camp Cottonwood in the high desert of New Mexico. I was supposed to hate them. Instead, I fell in love with one, and that love cost me everything I thought I wanted and gave me everything I did not know I needed. The telegram arrived on March 3, 1944. My younger sister, Catherine, 23 years old, had died in a London hospital. A V-2 rocket had hit the building where she worked as a volunteer nurse. She was killed instantly, they said, as if the speed of death made it easier to bear. I received the news in a tent in North Africa where I was recovering from shrapnel wounds that had torn through my left shoulder at Kasserine Pass. The pain in my body was nothing compared to the pain of those words. Catherine, gone. The sister who had written me letters every week, filling pages with gossip about neighbors and recipes for soda bread and promises to bake me a cake when I came home. There would be no cake. There would be no homecoming with her waiting at the door. The Army gave me morphine for the shoulder and 30 days compassionate leave. But there was nowhere to go. Our parents had died in a tenement fire in Boston when I was 19 and Catherine was 15. We had only each other. Now I had no one. When the leave ended, I was offered a choice: return to combat or accept a stateside posting guarding prisoners. The doctor said my shoulder would never fully heal, that I would always have limited mobility in my left arm. Combat duty was no longer an option, really, though they phrased it as if I had a choice. I chose New Mexico. I chose desert and distance, and the hope that maybe the emptiness of the landscape would match the emptiness inside me. Camp Cottonwood sat 30 miles west of Albuquerque, surrounded by red sand and scrub brush and sky so big it hurt to look at. The camp held 400 prisoners, including 38 women. These were not soldiers. They were clerks, translators, nurses, cooks. Women who had been in the wrong place when the war swept over them, who had been labeled enemy, and shipped across an ocean to a land that did not want them. I arrived in late March when the desert was still cold at night, and the wind carried the smell of creosote and distance. The camp commandant was Colonel Theodore Walsh, a West Point man with gray temples and eyes like rifle sights. He explained my duties with the precision of a man who had explained them 100 times before. Guard the perimeter, maintain discipline, prevent escape, treat the prisoners according to the Geneva Convention, which meant adequate food, adequate shelter, adequate medical care. Nothing more, nothing less. And absolutely under no circumstances develop any personal connection with the enemy. I nodded. I understood. I had no intention of connecting with anyone, enemy or otherwise. Catherine's death had hollowed me out. I felt like a shell going through motions, speaking words that meant nothing, eating food that tasted like sand. The other guards noticed. Private Eddie Kowalski, a kid from Pittsburgh, with a crooked smile and an endless supply of cigarettes, tried to pull me into card games and conversations. I declined politely. Corporal Martin Hayes, a quiet man from Georgia who read his Bible every night, invited me to prayer services. I made excuses. I wanted to be alone. I wanted to stand in the guard tower and watch the horizon and feel nothing. But then I heard her singing. It was my 4th day at Camp Cottonwood. I was walking the western perimeter fence at dawn, my breath forming clouds in the cold air. The sun was just beginning to paint the mountains pink and gold. Everything was silent except for the crunch of my boots on gravel. Then from somewhere beyond the fence, a voice rose into the morning air. It was singing in German. The melody was unfamiliar, slow and mournful like a lullaby for the dead. The voice was a contralto, rich and dark, carrying across the empty space between the women's barracks and the fence. I stopped walking. I stood completely still listening. The song continued for perhaps 2 minutes. Then it stopped as abruptly as it had begun. The silence that followed felt heavier than before, as if the music had carved out a space in the world that nothing else could fill. I found myself walking toward the women's section, though I had no reason to be there. My patrol route was the outer fence, not the interior compound. But my feet carried me forward anyway, drawn by something I could not name. Through the chain link, I saw them. 38 women in gray dresses standing in formation for morning roll call. Their breath made small clouds in the cold. Their faces were pale, exhausted, resigned. All except one. She stood in the back row, slightly taller than the others. Her hair was dark brown, almost black, pulled back from a face that was all sharp angles and watchful eyes. She was not beautiful in any conventional sense. Her nose was too long, her jaw too square, her mouth too wide. But there was something in the way she held herself, a fierce dignity, that made me unable to look away. I realized she was the one who had been singing. She must have felt me staring because she turned her head slightly and our eyes met. For perhaps 3 seconds, we looked at each other across 30 feet of wire and everything that wire represented. Her eyes were gray, the color of winter sky. They held no fear, no plea, no anger. Just a calm assessment, as if she were looking at a problem she needed to solve. Then she looked away and the moment ended. I continued my patrol with my heart beating faster than it should have been. I told myself it meant nothing. I had heard a song, I had seen a woman. That was all. But that night, lying in my bunk, I found myself humming the melody I had heard. And I realized it was the first thing in weeks that had made me feel anything other than empty. I learned her name through the administrative records I was not supposed to read. Corporal Hayes worked in the camp office processing prisoner files, and I volunteered to help him one evening, claiming I needed something to occupy my hands. Her name was Anneliese Hoffman, 31 years old, born in Munich, profession listed as pianist and music teacher, captured in France in August 1943 while performing for German troops at a military hospital, classified as civilian auxiliary non-combatant. There was a photograph clipped to her file. It showed a woman with severe hair and no smile staring into the camera with those same gray eyes. The photo told me nothing the file did not already say, except for one detail. Someone had written in pencil at the bottom of the page, "Refuses to speak English. Communicates only through translator." I closed the file and put it back in the cabinet, feeling like I had stolen something. Over the next week, I found excuses to walk past the women's section during my patrols. I told myself I was simply being thorough, checking for security breaches, observing routines. But the truth was simpler and more dangerous. I wanted to hear her sing again. She did not sing every day. Sometimes a week would pass in silence. Then unexpectedly, usually at dawn or dusk, her voice would rise above the compound. Always in German. Always alone. The other women never joined her. They would pause in their work, listening, their faces unreadable. The songs varied. Some were slow and sad. Others had a lilting quality, almost playful. Once she sang something that sounded like a children's song, and I saw one of the older women smile just for a moment before her face closed again. I asked Corporal Hayes if he knew why she sang. He shrugged. Some people pray. Some people write letters. She sings. Everyone's got their way of staying sane in a place like this. What does she sing about? How would I know? I don't speak German. He looked at me curiously. Why do you care? I did not have an answer. The willow tree grew near the western fence, its branches hanging over the wire like a green curtain. It was old, perhaps 40 or 50 years, far older than the camp that had grown up around it. Someone long ago had planted it near a spring that still bubbled up from the ground, creating a small pool of water that never dried even in the desert heat. The tree had become a gathering place for the women prisoners. During their exercise periods, they would sit in its shade, speaking quietly in German, mending clothes, writing letters that might never be sent. I started timing my patrols to coincide with these periods. I told myself I was maintaining security, watching for escape attempts or contraband, but I was watching her. Anneliese always sat slightly apart from the others, her back against the trunk of the willow. She would tilt her head back close to her eyes and let the dappled sunlight fall across her face. Sometimes she would hum softly melodies I could not quite hear. Sometimes she would be completely still, so motionless she might have been carved from stone. One afternoon in mid-April, something changed. I was walking my patrol route when I saw her standing alone by the fence looking out at the desert. The other women were inside escaping the afternoon heat, but she had remained outside despite the sun beating down like a hammer. She was holding something in her hands, turning it over and over. As I approached, I saw it was a small wooden box, perhaps 6 inches long, intricately carved with flowers and vines. I stopped on the other side of the fence, maintaining the regulation 6-foot distance. "That's a beautiful box," I said, knowing she would not respond. She never spoke to the guards, but I said it anyway, filling the silence with words that meant nothing. She looked up at me. For a long moment, she simply stared, those gray eyes measuring something I could not see. Then, to my complete shock, she spoke. It was my mother's. Her English was heavily accented but clear. "She kept her mother's ring inside. The ring is gone, taken when I was captured, but I still have the box." Her voice, speaking English, was different from her singing voice. Lower, rougher, as if she were forcing words through a throat not designed for them. I should have walked away. I should have reported that prisoner designation F-22 had lied about not speaking English. But instead, I moved closer to the fence. "I'm sorry," I said, "about your mother, about the ring." She looked at the box in her hands. "My mother died in 1940. Pneumonia. The ring was all I had left of her. Now I have this box with nothing inside." "Why did you tell everyone you can't speak English?" She raised her eyes to mine. "Because if they know I can understand them, they will expect me to respond, and I have nothing to say to any of you." "But you're speaking to me now." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Yes, I wonder why that is." We stood there in silence, separated by wire and the weight of nations at war. The sun beat down. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote yipped. "You sing," I said finally, "every few days. Why poem?" She considered the question. "Because it is the only thing they cannot take from me. My career, my home, my freedom, all gone. But they cannot stop me from singing. Even here, even now, my voice is still mine." "What do you sing about?" "Everything." "Nothing." "Old songs my mother taught me. Folk songs from Bavaria. Lieder by Schubert and Brahms. Sometimes I make up my own songs about this place, about the willow tree, about what it feels like to be a number instead of a name." "What is your name?" She looked surprised by the question. "You do not know." "I know what the file says, but I'm asking what you want to be called." Another long pause. Then Annalise. "My name is Annalise." "James," I said. "My name is James." She studied me with those gray eyes. "Why are you telling me this, James?" I did not have an answer. Or rather, I had an answer I could not speak aloud. "Because your singing makes me feel less empty. Because when I look at you, I remember there are things in the world besides grief and duty. Because I am lonely, and you are lonely, and maybe that is enough to bridge the distance between us." Instead, I said, "Because you're not a number. You're a person, and persons have names." She nodded slowly. "Yes, they do." She turned to go, then looked back. "Do not speak to me again, James. It is not safe for either of us." She walked away, still holding the empty box, and I was left standing at the fence, wondering what I had just started and whether I could stop it even if I wanted to. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in my bunk staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation in my mind. Her voice, her face, the way she said my name. Eddie Kowalski noticed my restlessness. "You all right, Sarge? You've been tossing around like you got ants in your bed." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine. You look like a man with something on his mind." He lit a cigarette, the match flaring bright in the darkness. "Woman trouble." "No." "Liar." He took a drag, the tip glowing red. "I've seen that look before. My brother had it when he fell for a girl my ma said wasn't good enough for him. Walked around like a ghost for months." "There's no woman, Eddie." "If you say so." He stubbed out the cigarette and rolled over. "But whoever she is, be careful. Getting your heart involved in this place is a good way to get it broken." After he fell asleep, I got up and walked outside. The night was clear, the stars so bright and numerous they looked like salt spilled across black cloth. I walked toward the fence line, not sure where I was going, only knowing I could not stay still. As I approached the western perimeter, I heard it again. That voice rising into the night air. But this time the song was different. Softer, almost a whisper made of melody. I moved closer, staying in the shadows. Through the fence, I could see her sitting beneath the willow tree, barely visible in the starlight. She was singing to herself, her arms wrapped around her knees, rocking slightly. I stood and listened until the song ended. Then I turned and walked back to the barracks, knowing I was already in too deep to find my way back out. The next day, during the afternoon exercise period, I found a small piece of paper tucked into the fence post near the willow tree. It was folded twice, no bigger than my palm. I palmed it quickly, looking around to make sure no one had seen. Then I walked to the latrine and locked myself in a stall to read it. The handwriting was precise, almost architectural. The message was in English. You asked why I sing. Here is the truth. In 1938, I performed at the Berlin Philharmonic. I was 25 years old and I had worked my entire life for that moment. I played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. When I finished, there was silence for 3 heartbeats. Then the applause came like thunder. I thought I had arrived. I thought my life would be music and beauty and art forever. Then the war began. Then my mother died. Then the concert halls closed. Then the bombs started falling. Then I was taken because I had been foolish enough to volunteer to play for wounded soldiers, thinking music might heal what medicine could not. Now I am here in this desert behind wire wearing gray cotton and eating food that tastes like cardboard. Everything I built is gone, but I still have my voice. And when I sing for those few minutes, I am not prisoner F-22. I am Annalise Hoffman, who once made an audience weep with joy. That is why I sing. Do not write back. Do not speak to me again. I am already regretting giving you this much of myself. A. I read the letter 3 times, then I burned it, watching the paper curl and blacken the words disappearing into ash. But the message remained burned into my memory. I did not write back. For 2 weeks, I maintained distance. I walked my patrols, I did my duty. I avoided the western fence during exercise periods. But I listened. Every dawn, every dusk, whenever her voice rose above the compound, I stopped whatever I was doing and listened. Corporal Hayes noticed. You got real still, he said one evening, as we were cleaning our rifles. Right in the middle of talking, just stopped and stared off into space. Did I? She's singing again, isn't she, that German woman? I said nothing. Hayes was quiet for a moment. My grandmother used to sing in Gaelic, old Irish songs about rebellion and lost love. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the feeling. Like she was keeping something alive that everyone else wanted to forget. Is there a point to this story, Martin? Just that some songs are not about the words. They're about remembering you're human when everything else is trying to make you forget. He went back to cleaning his rifle, and I sat with the weight of his wisdom. 3 weeks after our conversation by the fence, I made a decision that would change everything. I had a phonograph in my footlocker, a small portable model I had bought in Casablanca before shipping out. I had 3 records, Bing Crosby, Glenn Miller, and 1 classical album. I had never played a recording of Bach's Goldberg Variations, performed by a pianist whose name I could not pronounce. I brought the phonograph to the guard tower on the western perimeter, the one that overlooked the willow tree. It was my shift midnight to 4 in the morning. The camp was asleep. The desert was silent except for the wind. I put on the Bach record and turned the volume up just enough that it would carry. The music flowed out into the night, precise and mathematical, and somehow full of grace. The notes fell like drops of water into a still pool, each one creating ripples that touched everything. I watched the women's barracks. Nothing moved. The recording was 15 minutes long. When it ended, I lifted the needle and sat in silence, feeling foolish. What had I expected? That she would come running, that music could bridge the distance between prisoner and guard, between German and American, between loneliness and connection. I was putting the phonograph away when I heard a voice from below. Again, I looked down. She was standing just beyond the light, barely visible in the darkness. Her arms were wrapped around herself against the cold. Play it again, she said, please. I put the record back on. This time I did not watch the barracks. I watched her. She stood completely still as the music played. Her eyes closed, her face tilted up toward the stars. Tears ran down her cheeks, catching the faint light. When the music ended, she opened her eyes and looked up at me in the tower. Thank you, she said. Her voice was barely audible. You have no idea what you just gave me. What did I give you? A memory, a moment, a reason to believe that beauty still exists somewhere. She wiped her face with her sleeve. That recording is by Wilhelm Kempf. I heard him perform in Munich in 1936. It was the most perfect thing I have ever heard. You can hear him again, I said. Tomorrow night, same time. You will get in trouble. I don't care. She shook her head. You should care. You should walk away from this, from me. Nothing good can come from it. Maybe, I said, or maybe something good is the only thing that can come from it. She stood there for a long moment looking up at me. Then she turned and walked back toward the barracks, disappearing into the shadows. But the next night when I played the record again, she was waiting. And the night after that, and the night after that, we never spoke during these sessions. I played the music. She listened. When the record ended, she would nod once, then leave. But on the seventh night after the music stopped, she stayed. I need to tell you something, she said. What? My file says I am a music teacher. That is true, but it is not complete. Before the war, I was also a performer. Concert halls, recitals, private events for wealthy patrons. I made good money. I had a beautiful apartment in Munich. I had students who went on to prestigious conservatories. She paused. I also performed for the Nazi Party. The words hung in the air between us. I told myself it was just music, she continued, that art exists beyond politics, that playing Brahms for a room full of officers was no different than playing Brahms for a room full of teachers. But I was lying to myself. I knew what they were. I knew what they believed, and I took their money anyway. Why are you telling me this? Because if you are going to risk yourself for me, you should know who you are risking yourself for. I am not innocent. I am not a victim. I made choices, bad choices, and now I am paying for them. I thought about this, about the complexity of guilt, about the lies we tell ourselves to survive. We all made choices, I said finally. Some of us joined armies. Some of us played music. Some of us did both. The war doesn't care about our reasons. It just eats us all the same. That is a bleak philosophy. It's an honest one. She smiled for the first time. It transformed her face, completely softening the sharp angles, bringing light to those gray eyes. You are not what I expected, James. What did you expect? Someone who hated me. Someone who saw enemy before human. She looked away. Someone easier to dismiss. I'm sorry to disappoint you. You have not disappointed me. You have terrified me. Because now I have hope. And hope is the cruelest thing you can give a prisoner. Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, leaving me in the tower with a phonograph and a question I could not answer. Was I giving her hope, or was I giving myself hope? And if hope was cruel, why did it feel like the only thing worth holding on to? The following week, Colonel Walsh announced that the prisoners would be put to work in the camp's expanding vegetable garden. It was May and the desert was warming up. Food supplies were strained. The Geneva Convention required productive labor from able-bodied prisoners. The women would work 3 hours each morning, tending crops under the supervision of armed guards. I volunteered to be one of those guards. Eddie pulled me aside after the announcement. What are you doing, Sarge? Following orders. Bullshit. You hate gardening. You told me you killed every plant your mother ever gave you. Maybe I want to learn. He studied my face. Or maybe you want to be near someone. I met his eyes. Drop it, Eddie. I'm trying to help you. Whatever you're thinking, stop. I've seen men court-martialed for less. Hell, I've seen men shot for less. I'm not doing anything wrong. Not yet, but you're thinking about it. I can see it in your face. He gripped my shoulder. Brother, I'm begging you. Walk away before you can't. I nodded. Thanks for the concern. But I did not walk away. The next morning, I stood in the garden watching Annalise kneel in the dirt, her hands gentle as she planted tomato seedlings. She worked with the same precision she brought to everything else, placing each plant at exactly the right depth, patting the soil with careful attention. The morning sun caught in her dark hair. Sweat ran down her neck. She did not look at me once. But when the work period ended and the women filed back inside, she dropped something in the dirt near where I stood. It was a small folded paper. I picked it up after she had gone. There is a German folk song my mother used to sing. It is called Die Gedanken sind frei. The thoughts are free. It means that no matter what chains bind the body, the mind remains free to think, to dream, to remember. I think of this song often now. My body is here behind wire, but my mind travels. Sometimes to Munich, to my mother's kitchen, where bread was always baking. Sometimes to Paris, where I performed at the Salle Pleyel. Sometimes to places that never existed except in my imagination. And lately, my mind travels to a guard tower, where a man plays Bach in the middle of the night for no reason except kindness. I do not know what this means. I do not know what happens next, but I wanted you to know that my thoughts are free, and they are thinking of you. Forgive me, forget me, or risk everything. The choice is yours. E. I stood in the garden holding the note, feeling the desert sun beat down on my shoulders. The choice was mine. But standing there reading her words, I realized the choice had already been made. Part 2, The Garden and the Risk, 6,000 words. The garden became our meeting place, though we rarely spoke. Every morning for 3 hours, the women tended vegetables under the May sun, while guards watched from the perimeter. I stood at the western corner, near the willow tree, where I could see Annalise without appearing to watch her specifically. She worked with focused intensity, never looking up, never speaking. But twice a week she would leave a note hidden beneath a rock or tucked into the fence wire. And twice a week I would retrieve it. I never wrote back. The risk of being caught with incriminating evidence was too great. Instead, I found other ways to respond. When she wrote about missing German bread, I traded 3 days' worth of cigarettes to a supply sergeant for a loaf of pumpernickel. I left it wrapped in cloth near the fence. It disappeared by morning. When she mentioned that the record player had given her the first peaceful sleep she'd had in months, I started playing different music. Schubert Lieder, Brahms intermezzos, Mozart piano concertos. I did not know if these were pieces she knew, but I hoped the familiarity of German composers would bring some comfort. And when she wrote that she felt invisible, erased, reduced to nothing but a number and a gray dress, I did something reckless. I stole her file from the camp office. It was surprisingly easy. Corporal Hayes had been transferred to another duty, and his replacement was a lazy private who spent most of his shifts sleeping. I waited until he was snoring, then slipped into the file room and found the cabinet marked Female Prisoners F1 through F30. Annalise Hoffman, Prisoner F22. I did not take the entire file. Too obvious. Instead, I carefully removed the photograph clipped to the front page, the one showing her with severe hair and no expression, looking at the camera like it was another enemy to be endured. I replaced it with a different photo, one I had taken myself with a box camera Eddie had lent me. In this photo, Annalise was in the garden, her face turned toward the sun. Her eyes closed, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She looked peaceful, human, real. It was a tiny act of rebellion, changing one photograph, but it meant that anyone who opened her file would see her as I saw her, not as the army wanted to see her. I kept the original photo. I should have destroyed it. Instead, I hid it in my footlocker, wrapped in an old shirt, a secret I could not bring myself to eliminate. Eddie noticed the camera when I returned it. "Get some good shots," he asked, loading film into the device. "Just the garden. The tomato plants are coming in nice." "Right, the tomato plants." He closed the camera back and handed it to me. "You know what your problem is, Sarge? I'm sure you're going to tell me. You think nobody notices, but we all notice. The way you volunteer for garden duty, the way you stand at that western fence like you're waiting for something, the way you go up to the tower at midnight when you're not even on shift." My chest tightened. "Eddie, I'm not going to say anything. Neither is Martin. We figure you got your reasons." He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling blue in the afternoon light. "But Walsh ain't stupid. Neither are the MPS who come through on inspections. Eventually someone's going to notice, and when they do, it's going to be bad. I'm not doing anything wrong. You're lying to yourself, brother, and that's the most dangerous thing you can do." He walked away, leaving me standing there with the camera and the weight of truth I did not want to acknowledge. That night, I almost did not go to the tower. I almost stayed in my bunk, played it safe, put distance between myself and the danger I was courting. But when midnight came, my feet carried me up those metal stairs. And when I put on the record, Annalise was already waiting below. She looked different tonight. Her hair was loose, falling past her shoulders instead of pulled back. The moonlight caught silver threads I had not noticed before. She looked older, more vulnerable, more real. "I found bread," she said, "under the fence. It tasted like home. I'm glad. You should not have done it. Trading rations, risking discovery." "I wanted to." "Why, Bang?" The question was not accusatory, it was genuine searching. Why do you care what happens to me? I thought about this, about Catherine's death and the emptiness it had left, about walking through the world feeling like a ghost, about how Annalisa's singing had been the first thing in months to make me feel alive. Because you remind me that there are still beautiful things in the world, I said, and I need to remember that, maybe more than you need the bread. She was quiet for a long time. The record played on. Bach's precise mathematics filled the desert night. Can I tell you something? She asked when the music ended. Anything. I am starting to forget my mother's face. I remember pieces, her eyes, her hands, the way she hummed while cooking. But I cannot see the whole of her anymore. It is like she is disappearing, and that terrifies me more than anything else in this place. Her voice cracked on the last words. Do you have a photograph? I asked. No, everything was taken when I was captured. My purse, my papers, the small album I carried with pictures of my mother, my apartment, my students. She wrapped her arms around herself. I have only this. She tapped her temple, and it is failing me. I thought of the photograph in my footlocker, the one I had stolen from her file. Close your eyes, I said. What? Close your eyes, trust me. She hesitated, then did as I asked. Now describe your often, every detail you can remember. Say it out loud. She took a shaking breath. She had brown hair, lighter than mine. It went gray early, starting at the temples. She wore it in a bun at the back of her head, always neat, never a strand out of place. Good. What else? Her eyes were blue, bright blue like cornflowers. They crinkled at the corners when she smiled, which was often. She had a gap between her front teeth that she was self-conscious about. She would cover her mouth when she laughed. Annalisa's voice grew stronger as she spoke, the words coming faster. She was short, barely 5 feet. She wore an apron constantly, even when she was not cooking. It was green gingham. I bought it for her birthday in 1937. She loved it. Her hands were always rough from work, but gentle. She would braid my hair before bed, her fingers moving through the strands like music. She hummed while she worked. Always the same song. A lullaby her mother had sung to her. Tears were running down Annalisa's face, but she was smiling. She smelled like vanilla and bread dough and the lavender soap she made herself. Her voice was soft, but it could carry when she was angry. She called me Liebling, darling. Even when I was grown, even when I was performing in concert halls, I was still her Liebling. She opened her eyes. I remember. I can see her. Then she is not gone, I said. Not as long as you remember. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, James. That night, she did not leave immediately when the music ended. She stayed and we talked until the sky began to lighten in the east. She told me about her childhood in Munich, about learning piano from a strict Russian teacher who rapped her knuckles with a ruler when she made mistakes, about her first public performance at age 12 when she was so nervous she thought she would faint, about the moment she knew music was not just something she did but something she was. I told her about Catherine, about how we had survived on our own after our parents died, about the cake she had promised to bake, the cake that would never exist, about the guilt I carried for being alive when she was not. Survival is not a sin, Annalisa said. It is what we do with the survival that matters. What am I doing with mine? Right now, you are giving hope to a woman who had none. You are proving that kindness can exist even in places designed to eliminate it. That is not nothing, James. As dawn approached, she stood to leave. But before she went, she said, I am going to sing for you tomorrow. During the garden work, a song my mother taught me. Listen to the words. I think you will understand. The next morning, as the women worked in the garden, Annalise began to sing. The melody was simple, almost childlike. The German words meant nothing to me, but the emotion was clear. Longing, hope, a reaching towards something just beyond grasp. The other prisoners stopped working, listening. Even the guards paused. When the song ended, the silence was absolute. Then quietly, one of the other women began to sing the same song. Then another joined, then another. Within moments, 38 women were singing in harmony, their voices rising above the garden, above the fence, above the desert itself. I stood there watching Annalise, and she was looking directly at me, singing words I could not understand, but felt in my bones. Colonel Walsh came storming out of his office, demanding to know what was happening. The guards scrambled to restore order, shouting commands. But the women kept singing until the song was finished. Only then did they fall silent, return to their work, and resume being prisoners. Walsh was furious. He ordered extra inspections, reduced rations, canceled privileges. But he could not take away what had happened. For 3 minutes, the prisoners had not been prisoners. They had been women singing, human beings making beauty in a place designed to crush beauty. That night, Annalise's note was brief: Die Gedanken sind frei. Our thoughts are free. Our songs are free. And in that moment, we were free. Thank you for reminding us. But James, be careful. Walsh is watching now. We must be more cautious. She was right. Walsh started making unannounced inspections. He questioned guards about their routines. He implemented new rules: no guard could be assigned to the same prisoner section for more than 3 consecutive days. No fraternization, no unnecessary conversation. My midnight trips to the tower became impossible. Too risky. For 2 weeks, I did not play music. I did not speak to Annalise. I maintained regulation distance, followed every protocol, became the perfect soldier. It was torture. Eddie noticed the change. You look worse now than you did before, he said one evening. At least when you were breaking the rules, you had some life in your eyes. I'm following orders. Since when did that make anybody happy? He was right. Following orders was killing me as surely as shrapnel had wounded my shoulder. Maybe more slowly, but just as certainly. On June 6th, news reached the camp. Allied forces had landed on the beaches of Normandy. D-Day. The invasion of Europe had begun. The camp erupted in celebration. American guards cheered, threw their caps in the air, embraced each other. The war's end was in sight, but in the prisoner sections the mood was different. Some wept, some stood in stunned silence. Some retreated into their barracks and did not come out for days. Annalisa stood by the fence, looking west toward mountains she could not see beyond her face unreadable. I wanted to go to her, to say something, anything. But Walsh was watching, and the moment passed. That night, a new note appeared tucked into the fence post. My country is losing. My people are dying. Everything I knew is being destroyed. And yet I cannot mourn. Does that make me a traitor? Or does it make me something else? Something I do not have a word for in German or English. I am glad the war is ending. I am glad the killing might stop. But I am also terrified. What happens to us when it is over? Where do I go? Who am I in a world where everything I built is ash? The only constant is you. The man who plays music in the dark. The man who remembers I have a name. I need to see you, not just shadows and stolen moments. I need to speak to you face to face, even if it is dangerous. Even if it costs everything. Can you meet me tomorrow night? By the willow tree, I will understand if you do not come. But I am asking anyway, please. I read the note 3 times, then I burned it. And the next night I went to the willow tree. The willow branches created a curtain of shadow and moonlight. I could hear the spring water, trickling smell, the damp earth, feel my heart hammering against my ribs. She was already there, sitting with her back against the trunk, her knees drawn up to her chest. I sat down beside her, careful to maintain some distance, close enough to speak quietly, far enough to maintain the illusion of propriety, though we had shattered propriety weeks ago. You came, she said. I came. I was not sure you would, after Walsh increased patrols, after everything became more dangerous. It was already dangerous. She smiled. Yes, it was. We sat in silence for a moment. I could hear her breathing, see the rise and fall of her shoulders in the darkness. What did you want to tell me? I asked. She turned to face me, and in the moonlight filtering through the willow branches, her eyes were luminous. I wanted to tell you that I am afraid. Of what? Of this ending. Of you walking away when the war is over. Of being sent back to Germany to find nothing left. Of forgetting this feeling. What feeling? She reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were cold despite the warm night. This feeling that I matter to someone, that I am seen, that there is still tenderness in the world. I should have pulled away. I should have reminded her that we were guard and prisoner, American and German, that touching her was a violation of every regulation in the book. Instead, I held her hand tighter. You do matter, I said, to me, more than you should. Is there a limit to mattering? According to the army, yes. She laughed softly. The army does not understand the human heart. No, it doesn't. We sat there holding hands beneath the willow tree, and for a moment the war did not exist. There was no fence, no uniform, no designation F-22. There was only James and Annalise, two people finding each other in impossible circumstances. "What happens now?" she asked. "I don't know. Neither do I, but I know I do not want to let go." "Then don't." And we sat there until the sky began to lighten, holding on to each other and the fragile, impossible hope that somehow, against all logic, this might not have to end. The transfer order came 3 days later. I was reassigned to Camp Lordsburg, 200 miles south, effective immediately. Walsh delivered the news himself, his face carefully neutral. "You're being moved to a camp that needs experienced guards. You ship out tomorrow morning." "Sir, This is not a discussion, Sergeant. Pack your gear." Eddie helped me pack, his face grim. "They know," he said quietly. "Maybe not everything, but enough. They're splitting you up before it becomes a scandal." "I can't leave her." "You don't have a choice." "There's always a choice." He grabbed my shoulders. "Listen to me. If you desert, they will hunt you down. If you refuse orders, they will court-martial you. If you try to take her with you, they will charge you with kidnapping a prisoner of war. Any way you slice it, you lose. The only question is how much you lose. Then I lose everything. Or you go to Lordsburg, serve out your time, and find a way to reach her when the war ends. Stay alive. Stay free. Stay able to fight for her later. Later might be too late. It's the only option you have got." That night, I broke every rule I had left to break. I stole a guard uniform from the supply shed. I forged a movement order. I walked into the women's section as if I had authorization to be there. The prisoners stared at me in shock. One woman, Helga Berger, stepped forward, her eyes wide. "You should not be here," she said in accented English. "I need to see Annalise." "They will shoot you." "I don't care." Helga studied my face, then nodded slowly. "She is in the washroom, alone. You have 5 minutes before the night guard makes his round." I found Annalisa standing at the sink, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. When she saw me, she gasped, "James, what are you—" I pulled her into my arms, cutting off her words with a kiss. When we broke apart, she was crying. "They are sending you away." "Tomorrow morning." "Then this is goodbye." "No, this is not goodbye. This is a delay." "James, listen to me." I held her face between my hands. "The war is ending. Maybe in months, maybe in a year, but it's ending. And when it does, I will find you. I don't care if you are in Germany in a displaced persons camp on the moon. I will find you. You cannot promise that. I am promising it anyway." She kissed me again, fierce and desperate. "I love you," she said. "I tried not to. I tried to be sensible. But I love you, James Donnelly, and I will love you until the day I die. Then we'll find each other. Because love like this doesn't end just because the army says it has to." Footsteps echoed in the hall outside. The night guard was coming. "Go," Annalise whispered, "please, before they catch you." "I'll write to you." "Letters are censored. Then I'll find another way." One last kiss, one last embrace. Then I forced myself to let go and slip back into the darkness, my heart shattering with every step. I made it back to my barracks without being caught, but I knew it did not matter. The damage was done. We were separated, and I had no idea if I would ever see her again. The next morning, as I boarded the truck that would take me to Lordsburg, I looked back at Camp Cottonwood one last time. In the distance, by the western fence, I saw a figure standing beneath the willow tree. Even from this far away, I knew it was her. She raised one hand in a gesture that might have been a wave, or a blessing, or a prayer. I raised mine in return. Then the truck pulled away, and she disappeared from view. Camp Lordsburg was hell. The camp sat in a valley surrounded by mountains, a place where the heat was suffocating and the mood was hostile. The prisoners here were different, harder, more defiant. Many had been captured late in the war, still loyal to the Reich, still believing in ultimate victory. The guards were harder too, more brutal, less patient. I went through the motions of my duties like a man underwater. I did my job competently enough to avoid trouble, but nothing more. At night, I lay in my bunk and thought about Annalise, about her voice, her touch, the way she said my name. I tried to write to her. 3 times I composed letters pouring out everything I felt. All three times the letters were returned stamped unauthorized correspondence with enemy prisoner. Access denied. The army had built a wall between us, and I had no way to breach it. Weeks passed, then months. In August, the atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan surrendered. The war was over. The camps across America began processing prisoners for repatriation. Some would go home to Germany. Some would stay in displaced persons camps. Some would be charged with war crimes. I had no idea what category Annalise fell into. I applied for leave to travel to New Mexico. Denied. I requested a transfer back to Camp Cottonwood. Denied. I wrote to the Red Cross asking for information about prisoner F-22, Annalise Hoffman. They responded that they could not provide information about individual prisoners without proper authorization. I was trapped, helpless, unable to reach the woman I loved, unable even to confirm she was still alive. Martin Hayes, who had also been transferred to Lordsburg, found me one evening sitting alone behind the mess hall, staring at nothing. "You look like a man who's lost his faith," he said. "Maybe I have." He sat down beside me. "Or maybe you're being tested. This is a hell of a test. The good ones usually are." He pulled out his Bible, worn and dog-eared. "There's a verse I always come back to when things seem impossible. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. My hope has been more than deferred, Martin. It's been destroyed. Has it? Or has it just been delayed? What's the difference? Destroyed means it's gone forever. Delayed means you have to wait. And waiting is hard, but it's not the same as losing." I wanted to believe him, but belief felt like luxury I could not afford. In November, I was discharged from the Army. My service was complete, my obligation fulfilled. I returned to Boston with nothing but my duffel bag and a photograph I should have destroyed months ago, Annalise in the garden, her face turned toward the sun. The city was celebrating. The war was won. The boys were coming home. The future was bright. But I felt like I was moving through a dream. Nothing seemed real. Nothing mattered. I got a job at a factory. I rented a small apartment in South Boston. I went through the motions of building a life. But every night I wondered where she was, if she was alive, if she thought of me, if she had forgotten. The answer came in February 1946, 17 months after I had last seen her. I came home from work to find an envelope on my doorstep. No return address, foreign postage. Posted from Geneva, Switzerland. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in handwriting I recognized immediately. "James, I do not know if this letter will reach you. I do not even know if you are still alive. But I must try. I am in a displaced persons camp outside Munich. I have been here since October. The conditions are difficult, but I am alive. More than that, I am free. The camp administrators are processing applications for emigration. Many are going to America. I have applied as well. But the process is slow. It could take years. I sing every day now, not just for myself, but for the others here. The children especially. They need music. They need to remember that beauty exists. And when I sing, I think of you, of the nights you played Bach for me, of your hand in mine beneath the willow tree, of the way you made me believe that love could survive anything. I do not know if you still think of me. Perhaps you have moved on. Perhaps what we had was only real in that place at that time. Perhaps in the normal world it cannot exist. But I need you to know you saved me, not just from the camp, but from despair. You reminded me that I was human, that I deserved kindness, that I could love and be loved. Whatever happens next, thank you for that gift. If you wish to write back, you can send letters through the Red Cross Displaced Persons Bureau. They will forward them to me. But I will understand if you do not write. I will understand if too much time has passed. I will understand if the war ended more than the war. With all my heart, Annalise, I read the letter 5 times. 10, 20. Then I sat down and wrote back. Annalise, I have been searching for you for 17 months. I have written letters that were returned. I have made inquiries that were denied. I have spent every day since leaving New Mexico wondering if you were alive, if you were safe, if you remembered. Your letter is the answer to every prayer I did not know how to say. I am in Boston. I am working in a factory. I have a small apartment. It is not much, but it is mine. And if you can come to America, it could be ours. I meant every word I said beneath the willow tree. I love you. I will always love you. And I will wait as long as it takes. Tell me what you need. Tell me how to help. Tell me what I can do to bring you here. Because you are not the only one who was saved. You saved me too. Forever yours, James. The correspondence continued for 2 years. Letters took weeks to arrive, sometimes months. But they came steadily filling the distance between us with words. She told me about life in the displaced persons camp, about the children she taught music to, about the slow process of emigration, about the nightmares that still came but were less frequent now, about hope fragile but growing. I told her about Boston, about saving money, about the application I had filed to sponsor her emigration, about the apartment I was preparing for her arrival, about counting days. In April 1948, I received a telegram. Emigration approved, stop arriving New York, May 15 stop. SS Marine Flasher, stop Pier 84. Stop Annalise. I requested time off from work. I borrowed money from every friend I had. I bought a train ticket to New York and a bouquet of flowers and a ring I could barely afford. And on May 15th, 1948, I stood on Pier 84 in New York Harbor, watching the SS Marine Flasher steam slowly toward the dock. The morning was gray and misty, the city skyline barely visible through the fog. Around me, dozens of people waited for loved ones, families, friends, sponsors. I held the flowers so tight my hands ached. The ship docked, the gangway lowered. Passengers began to disembark. And then I saw her. She was thinner than I remembered. Her hair was longer, streaked with gray at the temples, though she was only 35. She wore a simple gray dress and carried a small suitcase. But her eyes were the same, gray as winter sky, searching the crowd. They found me. For a moment, neither of us moved. We just stared at each other across the crowded pier, across 4 years and an ocean and everything that had tried to keep us apart. Then she dropped her suitcase and ran. I met her halfway, and when we collided, it felt like coming home. She was crying. I was crying. We were both laughing and holding each other like we would never let go. You came, she said against my chest. You really came. I promised I would find you. 4 years, James, 4 years. I would have waited 40. She pulled back to look at my face, her hands framing my cheeks. You look older. So do you. Do you still love me? Even now, even after all this time. I pulled out the ring box. Annalise Hoffman, will you marry me? She stared at the ring, then at me, then laughed through her tears. You are insane. Is that a yeah? Yes, of course, yes. I slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly. We were married 3 days later in a small church in Brooklyn. Martin Hayes traveled from Georgia to stand as my best man. Eddie Kowalski came from Pittsburgh. A handful of other guards from Camp Cottonwood appeared, men who had known what was happening but had kept their silence. Annalise wore a simple white dress borrowed from the church. She had no family present, no one from her old life. But when the priest asked if anyone objected, the church was silent. And when he pronounced us husband and wife, she kissed me like we were the only 2 people in the world. The early years were not easy. We moved into my small Boston apartment. Annalise found work teaching piano to children in the neighborhood. I continued at the factory. Money was tight. Some neighbors whispered about the German woman. Some refused to speak to us at all. But we had each other, and that was enough. She sang in the apartment while cooking dinner. I played the phonograph while we danced in the living room. We built a life from small moments and stubborn love. We never had children. The war had taken that possibility from her, damage from malnutrition and stress that no doctor could repair. But we did not mourn what we could not have. We celebrated what we did. In 1952, we bought a small house in Brookline with a willow tree in the backyard. Annalise laughed when she saw it. It is a sign, she said. We are meant to be here. She planted a garden beneath that tree. She taught piano in the front room. She gave free lessons to children whose parents could not afford to pay. And every evening that she would sit beneath the willow and sing, not sad songs anymore, happy ones. Songs about survival and hope and love that refuses to die. I would sit beside her and listen, my hand in hers, and remember the woman I had first heard singing in a prison camp in New Mexico. The woman who had taught me that beauty could exist anywhere, that love could survive anything. That hope deferred was not hope destroyed. In 1965, we received a letter from Germany. It was from Helga Berger, the woman who had helped me find Anneliese on that last night at Camp Cottonwood. She wrote, "I have thought of you both often over the years. I wanted you to know that what you did gave the rest of us hope. In that terrible place, watching you two reach for each other across the wire, it reminded us that we were still human, that love was still possible, that the war had not destroyed everything. Thank you for that gift. Thank you for being brave enough to hold on to each other." With gratitude, Helga, Anneliese cried when she read it. "I never knew," she said. "I never knew other people were watching, that it mattered to anyone but us." "It always mattered," I said. "Love always matters." We grew old together in that house beneath the willow tree. We watched the world change, watched wars come and go, watched children grow up in the neighborhood, some of them Annaliese's former students now bringing their own children for lessons. I retired from the factory in 1975. Anneliese retired from teaching in 1980, but she never stopped singing. Even when her voice grew thin and wavering with age, she would sit beneath the willow tree and sing the old German songs her mother had taught her. And I would sit beside her and listen, my hand in hers, grateful for every moment. In 1994, Anneliese died in her sleep at the age of 81. I woke to find her beside me, peaceful, her hand still in mine. She looked like she was simply sleeping, a small smile on her lips. The funeral was small. Our neighbors came. Former students came, some now in their 50s and 60s, bringing their own children and grandchildren. They each told stories about the woman who had taught them music and kindness in equal measure. At the end of the service, a young woman I did not recognize approached me. "Mr. Donnelly, I'm Sarah Klein. My grandmother was Helga Berger. She passed away last year, but before she died, she asked me to give you this if I ever had the chance." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a photograph I had not seen in 50 years. It was the one I had taken of Anneliese in the garden at Camp Cottonwood, the one that had been confiscated, the one I thought was lost forever. A note was attached in Helga's handwriting. "I stole this from Walsh's office the day they questioned us. I kept it all these years waiting for the right time to return it. Now seems right. She was beautiful inside and out. You were blessed to love her. She was blessed to be loved by you. HB." I held the photograph and wept. That evening, I buried it beneath the willow tree in our backyard along with Annaliese's ashes, and I sang for her the same German folk song she had sung for me that first morning in New Mexico, the one I had never understood the words to, but had felt in my bones. Die Gedanken sind frei. The thoughts are free. I am 92 years old now. The house is gone sold after I could no longer maintain it. The willow tree was cut down by the new owners. But I carry the memory, I carry the photograph in my mind, I carry the sound of her voice in the deepest part of my heart. And sometimes in the quiet moments between sleeping and waking, I hear her singing. Not a memory, not a ghost. Just Anneliese, as real as she was that first morning when I heard her voice rise above a prison camp in the New Mexico desert. As real as she was beneath the willow tree, her hand in mine. As real as love that survived barbed wire and regulations and war itself. The nurses here think I am confused when I talk to her. They think grief has made me delusional. But I know better. She is here. She has always been here. Because love like ours does not end when the breathing stops. It continues. It endures. It sings. And when my time comes, when I finally close my eyes for the last time, I know exactly where I will go. To a garden beneath a willow tree, where a woman with gray eyes and a voice like prayer is waiting. Where barbed wire does not exist. Where war is just a distant memory. Where two people who should have been enemies found each other and held on against everything that tried to tear them apart. That is where I am going, and I am not afraid, because I know she is waiting. And this time there will be no wire between us. This time we will have forever. In 2015, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum received a donation from the estate of James Patrick Donnelly. The collection was cataloged as the Hoffman-Donnelly Papers, A Study in Love During Wartime. Researchers studying the papers noted that the correspondence revealed a relationship that challenged contemporary understandings of duty, nationality, and the nature of the enemy. But those who read the letters themselves found something simpler and more profound. Two people who refused to let war define who they could love. Two people who proved that humanity can survive anything. Two people who sang to each other across barbed wire and found a way to make the song last a lifetime. The exhibition opened in May 2016. Among the visitors was a woman in her 70s named Maria Klein, Helga Berger's granddaughter. She stood before the photograph for a long time reading the placard that explained its provenance. Then she smiled and whispered, "Diga Duncanson Fry. The thoughts are free." And love, she thought, looking at that image of a woman in a garden with sunlight on her face, love is the freest thought of all.